This is my group's Freedom Project, and it is by Teresa Dill, Lisa Murphy, Maria Chow, and Caroline Williams. So the essential question is, when, if ever, are limits on freedom necessary? My group decided that every human being on this earth is obligated to have freedom. It creates a more diverse environment and promotes creative ideas that could change the world. Although there are some times when limits on freedom are necessary. Some of those times are when people take advantage of their freedom and or use their freedom to hurt others. As there are many good people in this world, there are as many bad people, which limits on freedom could be necessary. Freedom is a concept that is recognizable to any person on this earth. It allows others to come up with their own ideas, express their opinions, and allows anyone to live their life as they want to. Although freedom was a term that had many different definitions throughout history, as racial and gender inequality was very prevalent in the past, freedom only seemed to accustom certain people during that time. Now, many countries are advancing in areas such as technologies, which also results in growth. Freedom is now heavily recognized and accepted to include all types of people, but unfortunately, not all countries currently see freedom as accepting all people. The speech at the United Nations is Malala Yousafzai presenting a speech about how she struggled all her life to attain freedom and expresses her concerns on how important it is to have this power. Line 12 says, "I raise up my voice not so that I can shout, but so those without a voice can be heard." In the speech, Malala states how her life was always dangerous and when she tried to become free, she was shot. Although Malala still believes that freedom is deserved by all, even to her enemies. Line 16 says, "I do not even hate the Taliban who shot me." Much in freedom today is taken for granted and easily accessible, but for some it is the key to the... So the picture on the left is Malala when she was shot in the head by the Taliban for wanting to learn about the world. And the picture in the right is Malala now as she speaks about the problems that she faced and uncovers the terrors that the Taliban has caused. With the thought of the essential question, limits on freedom would not be necessary because it has been used to spread light on a problem and to help others. Without Malala's fight for freedom, many people would remain in the darkness. When Diane Sawyer interviews Malala, she asked Malala when she was most afraid. Malala says, "Like I was feeling fear all the time at night when I used to sleep." The biggest obstacles that Malala had to face was fear and death. Many people will usually keep quiet when these are the obstacles, but Malala valued freedom than anything, which made her determined to push on. This is a video where Diane Sawyer interviews Malala, and she also talks about Malala's life. Diane describes the ways of what the Taliban did to cause terror to others, including Malala. Diane says they terrorized the town with corpses in the street, flogging women publicly.
The poem Cage Bird contrasts the privileges of a free bird to the obligations of a cage bird. The free bird has the privilege to enjoy nature and to fly wherever it wants to. A quote is, "A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends. The free bird can relax and be free. A cage bird is obligated to stay in the cage and can't fly because its wings are clipped and its feet are tied. The only privilege is to sing for freedom, but the cage bird doesn't have freedom. The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but long for still. The cage bird doesn't know what freedom is, but he wants to have it. The limits on the cage bird's freedom shouldn't be necessary because it can't fly and the bird can barely see through its cage. The cage bird should have the same privileges as the free bird." In this poem, some advice to those who were served time in prison. It explains the different ways to cope with being in prison but still being able to live. The main obligation is to live. A quote is, "You'll put your foot down and live. It may not be a pleasure exactly, but it's your solemn duty to live one more day despite the enemy." The poet includes different ways to pass the time in prison. A quote is, "To think of seas and mountains is good. Read and write without rest, and I also advise weaving and making mirrors." Limits on freedom wouldn't be necessary because in the poem it says that you can survive 10 or more years in prison if you don't give up hope.
The censors is a very controversial story as some of the actions the censors perform to look over the letters seem reasonable and necessary while others seem wrong. The censors disrupt people's freedoms when they look at every letter as seen in the quote. He knows that they examine, sniff, feel, and read between the lines of each and every letter and check its tiniest comma and most accidental stain. Juan was scared that the censor's secret command would do something to Mariana, as seen in the quote, showing that he could not even send a letter to Mariana without fear of something happening to her based on what he wrote. Everyone was able to apply for jobs, including to be a censor, which gives people the freedom to apply for a job whenever they want to. When we learn that some of the censors got hurt during their jobs, it tells us that some of the letters do need to be checked in order to keep people safe. Knowing all this information, it makes it hard to decide if the censor's job is a disruption of freedom or a cautious step for safety.
From the Freedom of the Press Report 2015, Obligation. This report is about how journalists were constricted about what they could write and post about online. The government applied censorship. This was to silence the people's criticism, and they would arrest the person writing if what they thought was writing was not appropriate. Terrorists would kidnap and murder the journalists. They put these stuff in place to solve armed conflicts such as this. Privileges. The Freedom House. This was an organization around the world that fought oppressive ideologies through the spread of democracy. They release the Freedom of the Press report every year.